Overlord. Volume 14, Chapter 4, Well-Prepared Traps, Part 2b. Ins returned to Nazarick with gate and took the ring from the usual place. He used its power to advance towards the 9th floor with Albedo. After some time traveling by foot, they reached the room that was their destination. Albedo, do you want to head inside first? No, it is fine. You contributed more this time around, so you should be the one to enter first. Ins thanked her and opened the giant doors. He walked to the center of the room, in front of the throne, and took a knee as he bowed. He could feel that Albedo, who was behind him, was making the same movements. Good work, Pandora's actor and Albedo. We are not worthy of your praise. Upon raising his head, he saw his master nodding regally. On his sides were Ch4 and Demiurge, who was holding a mirror of remote viewing. He must have observed the entirety of his battle with Riku through that item. Pandora's actor undid his transformation. While we wanted to return the magic items that we had borrowed from Insama, we found it to be disrespectful to make Insama wait any longer. Do forgive us for still wearing Insama's equipment. He meant the equipment that he was currently wearing, lower tier backup items that they had been lent from their master. He was intensely apologetic for still having those items equipped. Haha. Pandora's actor, pay it no mind. It would have been fine for you to do as you wished. This was not such a big deal after all. What was important was your opponent. Now then, while we have seen the battle, I still wish to hear from the combatant himself. How was it? Yes. I believe that he is a tank whose level was around 90. That was because magic was generally ineffective against him, which was why I had judged him to be of that level. I see. A strong foe. Huh. What's wrong, Albedo? Do you have another opinion? Yes, my opinion differs from Pandora's actor's. I do not believe him to be that strong. Of course, I only landed 2 strikes on him, so I could not make as accurate of a judgment, but he felt like a tank of around, level 80 or so. Given that they were sure that he was a tank, then Albedo's opinion as a tank should be much more accurate than his own. I see. Although I was of the opinion that Pandora's actor, who was locked in combat with him for longer, would be able to make the more accurate judgment, Ch4, who had been observing the battle alongside me, had estimated a similar range to Albedo's. Around level 85 or so. Given that, it appears that there is a need to call Cocytus and Sabas over. While Ch4's combat prowess was high, her build was not focused on pure physical damage output. It was unfortunate that Sabas was on standby in Irantal and Cocytus was overseeing the siege of the capital, so they could not be summoned over at the current moment. If if we combined all 3 of your estimates. So, are the 3 of you in agreement that the opponent was a tank that specialized in magic resistance? The 3 fell into deep contemplation. Ch4, why do you seem troubled? If something is wrong, do speak your mind. I may have just gotten the wrong impression, Aransu. That is fine too. After all, this entire operation was to expose this foe's abilities and thus have been meticulously planned from the outset. As long as we could gain some sort of insight on our opponent, do feel free to speak your mind. If that is the case. Insama, because I can also summon Doom Lords, perhaps Insama had already noticed Aransu. It felt like its combat abilities were weakened significantly. Was it because Pandora's actor was the summoner Aransu? That would not be the case. While Pandora's actor's transformations are weaker than the original, his summons would not be any weaker. In addition, he had been instructed to not use any special abilities of mine to strengthen the summons. In any case, shall we both summon Doom Lords for you all to observe after this? Perhaps you could figure out what had been bothering you. Understood. Now then, Pandora's actor, you spoke with him, correct? What did you talk about, what attitude did he adopt, and what emotions could you feel from him? Do tell us in detail. After all, This mirror cannot transmit sound. Understood. Pandora's actor began reenacting his conversations with Riku. Their conversations weren't long, so it was pretty easy to act out. He even injected some of his own interpretations mid-dialogue, the emotions he felt through Riku's tone and the respective explanations. Midway through, Pandora's actor sensed from behind him an unpleasant aura emitted by Albedo. She spoke with an annoyed tone. Even if you wanted our opponent to lower his guard, to kneel as the Sorcerer King, and by extension as the absolute overlord of the great underground tomb of Nazarick, Insama, is just out of line. Indeed, he had felt that he had gone overboard. If his master was there instead, he would have never done that. I have to pay for my transgression, he thought as he raised his head to see that his master was nodding along in a gratified manner. He must be agreeing with Albedo's opinion. But just as Pandora's actor was about to lower his head, his master's voice reached his ears. No, that was executed beautifully. While he sounded somewhat sarcastic, his master did appear to be in a good mood. Pandora's actor could not tell which side he was on and thus missed his opportunity to bow. That kneel was great. If merely kneeling could cause an opponent to falter, I would kneel any number of times. We lost nothing through that kneel, yet it made the opponent think that we were nothing to be on guard for. He should not have noticed that he had been duped yet. How awe-inspiring. Though he already had an idea of the extent of his creator's drive for victory, chills were still sent down Pandora's actor's back. Even against an opponent that could be easily defeated should he be serious, he would still not deign himself too mighty to do such a thing in order to invoke a false sense of security in them. Could any king, nay could any overlord trademark really care not for their own reputation to scheme at this level? Could any being who was only served upon but had never served, resolutely kneel in front of their enemy? No such being existed, other than his master, the one seated in front of him. They must have had the same thought. The other guardians in the chamber had expressions that told of the awe invoked within them. Among them, Demiurge was the one to ask. Would it not rouse more suspicion in our opponent if one as great as Insama knelt down in those circumstances? He must have judged that Insama was someone who was capable of deducing the best move for every situation. No, surely no one's thought process would lead them to that conclusion normally, correct? He's not so impressive after all, or so that's what you were really like, was probably what was going through his mind, correct? If the situation were flipped. If I were in his shoes, I would probably be as careless as he was, right? No, I would probably kill him right away. What would you do, Albedo? If they were just a regular civilian, I would kill them immediately, but if they were a king I might capture them for intel. Would I get careless? Maybe. Is that so? Shaltir, what about you? I would mull it over Aransu. Perhaps it would not have an effect at all. It would be best if kneeling was not necessary. It would not be the best situation if you could not dodge the enemy's attacks. Now then, let's change the topic. About that barrier. Pandora's actor could not figure out what that barrier was at all. He had thought that it blocked physical and magical access in and out of it, but Albedo could enter unhindered. So, was the mystery solved? The two of you might have figured it out already, but I do believe that it was because of world items. Pandora's actor, from what you have said, you were not too sure, were you? Pandora's actor's eyes widened. Indeed, if that was the case, everything made sense. Albedo had a WCI on her person back then and he did not. But how did Insama figure it out? A logical line of questioning. I was using the mirror to observe Pandora's actor and Riku's battle. Even after that barrier was erected, the mirror was not affected at all. At first I thought that it was just something cosmetic to scare us. In's gaze fell on Pandora's actor, but it did have effects. I switched my train of thought and began investigating the differences between us more accurately, the differences between me, the user of the mirror, and Pandora's actor. Ins touched the WCI in his abdomen. After I took this off, I could no longer see anything through the mirror. Equipping it allowed me to see the scene again. It is highly likely that Riku has an ability that is similar to Aura's world item. Please wait, Insama. Riku did mutter the phrase world isolating barrier and it did expend his HP. So was it not a special skill that only higher level beings like Insama could obtain? Like Insama's trump card. It would be impossible to accomplish what he did through the same system our powers came from. Rather, is it not more likely that he used that term as a bluff? The expenditure of HP could be an activation condition for a world item. Problem is, I have never heard of such a world item. While many do have activation costs, merely reducing one's HP would almost be cute. Was his HP constantly drained? Pandora's actor shook his head at Albedo's question. It fell only after he activated it. The barrier did not appear to be continuously draining him to maintain itself. Exactly. Did you not say that his other abilities also drained his health? Indeed, there are world items with multiple abilities, for example, this one. His master touched his orb, but, the rules his abilities were playing by were just too different from ours. The abilities he used were probably weapon enhancement, armor enhancement, teleportation, and barrier. I talked about ability systems before because if his powers were unique to this world, then everything would be explained. Assuming the worst case scenario, it is some unusual ability that could rival world items. If that is the case, we cannot even be sure if what brainwashed Ch4 was a world item or not. We would have to re-evaluate that. How annoying. Insama, as it stands, we do not have enough information. Exactly, Demiurge, perhaps there is a need to lose to Riku again. The two guardians next to the throne had displeased expressions on their faces. It was easy to imagine that the albedo behind him must have been the same. Even if it was intentional, nobody present would feel happy that their master was to lose. Wipe those expressions off of your faces. I am not losing because I desire to lose, but because it is a necessity to understand our opponent's deck. That is how we guarantee victory, it cannot be helped. If this was a simple training exercise, losing would not mean death, neither would we have to put up such an act. However, this is actual combat. Everybody, including Pandora's actor, were quietly listening to their master's every word. We have already confirmed that you all and the inhabitants of this world could be resurrected, but what about me? While we do not have solid proof of this, the 6 great gods and 8 greed kings of yore were probably being similar to what I am. Their legends concluded with their deaths, so it's likely that they could not be resurrected. We have no choice but to assume that to be the truth when carrying out these operations. To put it simply, in order to avoid my death, the worst form of defeat, we have no option but to accept other forms of defeat. Insama. What's wrong, Albedo? Insama, what you have just said made a lot of sense. So would it not be better for you to stay within the great underground tomb of Nazarick, rather than leave for excursions? A perfectly logical conclusion. If there was a possibility that their master could not be revived, then having him stay where it was safest for him and not step out of that place would be best. Indeed. I have thought of that too, but surely you could understand it too. Especially you all. His brain went into overdrive in an attempt to understand what his master was talking about, but nothing came to mind. What a deplorable thing. As one of the foremost intellectuals in Nazarick, he still could not immediately grasp his master's thoughts. Pandora's actor racked his brains until strange liquid almost began to seep out of it. It was the same for Demiurge and Albedo, one could see it on their faces. Ch4, on the other hand, looked like she wasn't thinking at all. Don't think about the others. Pandora's actor forced his attention away from them. Silence fell upon the group for quite a while, only to be broken by their master's disappointed sigh. Pandora's actor felt unbearable shame, and so did Demiurge. While he could not see Albedo, who was behind him, she was surely the same. What's wrong? Raise your heads. He spoke with such a harsh tone, yet Pandora's actor could not allow himself to disobey a direct order from his master. He raised his head. Let us move on to the next topic. Who is that person? What connections to platinum could you think of? Albedo spoke first. One of the possibilities is, just as Pandora's actor had said, that our opponent was one of the 13 heroes. His master nodded in agreement. The other possibility is that he is one of the counselors of the Council State, Platinum Dragon Lord. Those are the only beings I could think of with a connection to platinum. Given that, let me ask a question. Was he trying to fool us into believing that he was the Platinum Dragon Lord or one of the 13 heroes so that we would go against them, or not? The answer might also lie in between those two extremes. So, what do you believe is the correct answer? I am terribly sorry, Insama. As we do not have enough information to work off of, it is difficult to conclusively judge which is the correct answer. Demiurge answered so. Pandora's actor concurred, but since his master had asked, what do you believe was the correct answer, the correct response should have been one of the options. That was probably why he had prefaced his answer with an apology. Are there any other opinions? There appears to be none. I too agree with Demiurge's opinion that we do not have enough intel. After we are done with the kingdom, do gather the opinions of the other floor guardians on this matter. Perhaps one of them could notice a detail that we had missed. In any case, we are still proceeding with our plan to send envoys to the Council State. While they greet the heads of state, have them sarcastically scoff at this Platinum Dragon Lord fellow a few times. That should be fine, right? Albedo. Understood. How shall I deal with the contents of the missive? I will leave that up to you. Understood. That should about conclude this meeting, correct? I should return to the capital soon. Pandora's actor, though it might be embarrassing, I must ask you to stree. An AHH sound could be heard. His master turned his head around to the guardian who had made that sound. What's wrong, Shaltir? Did you forget something? Yes, Insama. I do have a question, Aransu. Were you really planning to recruit that Rika person as a subordinate, Aransu? Ah, about that. Of course not. If he really came under my wing, I would gather all the information I need, the organization he served, its purpose, etc., and he would be killed afterwards. Would it not be a waste to kill him? He could sense that his master had a wry smile on him upon hearing Albedo's question. I am not confident in my abilities to rein him in. If you are asking if we could exploit those unusual abilities of his or his world item, whichever was the case, Albedo, would you be confident enough to do that? If you are, I will leave it all up to you. It would be difficult to do so before we have collected enough detailed intel. But if it turned out that it was indeed possible for us to do so, there are many places where he could be of use to us. His master's gaze lingered on Albedo. He was probably contemplating about Albedo's abilities and Riku. If his creator was one to even include what could happen a millennium down the line into his grand scheme, he was probably analyzing how Riku could factor into his plans. The destruction of the kingdom must be part of those plans as well. He must have had ulterior motives beyond demonstrating to the world the difference in treatment received by the kingdom and the empire due to their actions. That had to be why he would go back on his words in order to invade the kingdom. This was a common opinion shared by Pandora's actor, Albedo, and Demiurge. One would not have to think too hard to connect the undead creation experiments to this. After all, he was his creator. This was undoubtedly a premonition of something greater to come, something not even he could fathom. His creator, a supreme being whose intellect held such depths, how awesome was he? To be honest, Pandora's actor felt sorry for the others. It pained him how he had to restrain himself from boasting of his dear creator. I see. Indeed, he would be of no use to us dead. I will hear Demiurge's opinion on this too, and depending on the situation, Albedo will be placed in charge of this. Of course, that is assuming that Riku would be willing to serve under me. If he is not willing, killing him is permissible. It was impossible for anyone to object to that. If their master willed it so, it must be correct. Good. Now, other opinions, appears to be none. It is about time for me to return to the capital. I still have to close the curtains on that show. Such petty theatrics would not require Insama to personally participate, correct? I believe that I can handle it on my own. No, Albedo. Pay it no mind, I will go. Hee, though I may not be on the same level as Ulbert-san and the rest, I still have my own standards to enforce against forms of resistance. I see, was that why? Albedo replied in a manner that implied that she had seen through the hidden meaning behind his words, prompting his master to glance at her. He must have been checking how much of his words she understood. After some time had passed, his master seemed satisfied as he declared in a manner expected of an esteemed ruler. Exactly, Albedo. It is exactly as you have surmised.